that it was a collaborative effort between elements in the CIA, not everybody in the government, just elements in the CIA who were involved in black ops and this kind of stuff, working for higher, wealthier people who, for various reasons, I think it was a confluence of interest. It was people in the CIA, it was people in organized crime who were not happy with Bobby Kennedy going after the mobsters after they helped get the Kennedys elected. And then we've also got other figures in other foreign nations who had an interest in getting rid of JFK. So in my view, it was that confluence of interest. Well, it's not hard to figure out if you understand the basics of this narrative. Now, I don't think we have to know. It's just it's like the Big 9 event. Like, we don't have to know perfectly every single piece of detailed information regarding this event. Now, this refers to a lesser known thing, which I don't have. I have Michael Collins P's book at my other location. It's not in this library, so I can't look it up. But I think he mentions this. I read that book in 2008, so we're like 17 years out from me reading that book. People were like, "Oh, I've been pioneering the role of Middle Eastern countries in this JFK thing." Oh, really? Like when I read the book in 2008. And yeah, look, yes, JFK opposed certain Middle Eastern countries having a nuclear program. Demona, I've known about that since 2008. What are you talking about? Now, this relates to a network or a group of Cubans in Chicago, one of whom is named, it's a weird name, Echevarria. And this was a investigation memo. This is weird too, because this might have already been declassified. I don't know. It says declassified 76 or 8, but it says Special Agents Tucker and Noonan investigation of the claims of Echevarria. And Echevarria says that he was attempting to negotiate the sale of weapons to a group, and that he made a comment allegedly the day before associating JFK and the taking out of JFK with a group of backers from, say, the Middle East that would take care of Kennedy. Now, this doesn't mean, this is a person that in the investigations says this, okay? So it's not like die-hard proof, it's just one of several of these where people are saying throughout the years of this investigation by the different agencies. And by the way, the FBI, I think, has their own files on this. So one correction that should be made, because this is going around and I looked into this one, people are saying the 1956 Hungarian riots were orchestrated with the support of the CIA. Now, it turns out that this is not talking about that. If you look, it actually says the HFFF, but that's a group that's an NGO created after this event in 1963. However, it's not outside the realm of possibility. It's very likely that the CIA did aid the anti-Soviets and sought a regime change coup in 1956 during the Cold War, so that certainly makes sense. You can find London Telegraph articles that talk about British intelligence training these people. So it's not, I mean, most likely the CIA did as well. But this is really a minor point. This one is the one I think most people expected to see, and is probably one of the more damning, which is that the CIA does not have objection to the declassification of these documents except for the mentioning of the bracketed, which is, quote, I intelligence service of the Middle East. So here you have the CIA admitting, probably because they don't want to have a damaging, I mean, you could look at it from like just a basic geopolitical perspective, that they don't want to have a damaging relationship through the release of these documents, and so that's why that was put there. Or you could say it's more conspiratorial, that they're told you got to do this. There are, by the way, quite a few people in the history of the CIA and in the CIA who have been pretty vocal about not being pro-Israel. You can go back even to the Bush era, when Bush shifted away from Israeli intelligence and was interested in The Safari Club being an outfit which was Saudi connected and all that. There's a whole story behind that which is unique and interesting that not many people know about. And that doesn't mean that Bush Sr. didn't still have connections or uses for Israeli networks or whatever. But it is relevant because there have been tons of CIA individuals who do not particularly care for Israeli intelligence or the Israelis, or are critical of it. And so it's not a unified thing where everybody in the CIA just does what they're told. You can look up Michael Scheuer, who was the head of the Bin Laden unit. I've shared that clip 20 times. And Scheuer, in many interviews, says that the main problem in American geopolitics and foreign policy is Israel. And he's made that criticism for like 2 decades. And he was the head of the Bin Laden unit for the CIA. So it's not like everyone in the CIA had this attitude. In fact, Dulles and others back in the classic era of the CIA were seemingly a little more on the side of Tiny Mustache Man. And, you know, they were involved in Operation Paperclip, this kind of stuff. So there was not a unified mindset even in the CIA. Maybe over time, as the Cold War progressed, then you get people like James Jesus Angleton, who was, very much pro-Israel, very much pro-Zionist. In fact, there's a garden dedicated to him in Israel. And he had a back channel with I intelligence, as well as some of the documents will show. Now, in regard to JFK, this one was one of the more interesting documents. I don't know if this document had already been declassified. It looks like one of the new ones because there's a lot of claims flying around. So, anything I say that's incorrect, I welcome being corrected. We just had to mention a correction on last night's stream in regard to that fake Bob Baer interview from many years ago. So, but this one is interesting because it notes this character by the name of Underhill, who had been an intelligence agent in World War II. He was recognized as an authority on limited warfare and small arms. He was a researcher and a writer on military affairs. He was on a first-name basis with a lot of the top brass in the Pentagon. He was also on intimate terms with a number of high-ranking CIA officials. He was the agency's unpeople, so sort of a ghost operative. He performed special assignments, and at one time had been a friend of Samuel Cummings of Ramco, the arms broker that numbers amongst its customers the CIA, and Klein's Sporting Goods of Chicago, where the mail order Carcano allegedly was purchased by Oswald. Now remember, this is the Chicago is where this group of supposedly Cubans who are hired to do this event with JFK, that from the previous memo, the Echevarrio guy, that was also out of Chicago. And the reason that's relevant is because the leader of the Mafia in Chicago was Sam Giancana Momo, who is tied into CIA and Operation Underworld and other. I mean, Operation Underworld is older, but the CIA continued the underworld alliances with organized crime. I've interviewed Sammy the Bull Gravano, the most famous living. I mean, I've been on his podcast like 10 times. He pretty much confirms all that as well in our discussions. And so you've got the reason also that the Mafia is a key player in this is that the Mafia were mad at the Kennedy brothers for many things. They were cracking down on the drugs. The Mafia had helped RFK get elected, and so that was in Chicago, if I recall. So they helped the vote rigging there by, and this is well known, everybody knows this, not even that really that controversial anymore. And then RFK Jr., when he started cracking down on organized crime, he, instead of arresting Carlos Marcello, who was the New Orleans-based gangster that was running the mob out of New Orleans, he banished him to Guam or somewhere. Like they put him in a plane, they flew him to Guam and just dropped him off. Well, he made his way back through a shrimp boat, apparently. And when he got back, he was like, okay, we're going to take care of these Kennedy boys because we helped them get elected. They don't want to do what we are telling them to do. And Carlos Marcello is famously on tapes. The FBI has recorded tapes, but they're inadmissible because they were recorded illegally. Marcello bragging that they got Kennedy. In other words, we, the Mafia, did this. Not just the Mafia, you see. So people are overly simplistic. They think, was it the Mafia or was it the CIA? Well, the CIA has worked with the Mafia since the OSS and Operation Underworld, which we've lectured on. That also does tie into Gladio. So this document mentions this CIA or this deep state operative guy who had been talking about this. The day after the assassination, Gary Underhill left Washington in a hurry. Late in the evening, he showed up at the home of friends in New Jersey. He was very agitated. A small clique within the CIA was responsible for the assassination, he confided. Guess what? That's exactly what backs up most of the theories in regard to this, whether it's Michael Collins' P, whether it's Roger Stone's book. And other books, by the way, have focused on one of the groups, the Mafia, CIA, other countries. Those are not wrong. They're just looking at certain angles of the players that were involved in this. So remember, the mobsters are used because they're convenient ways to organize a hit. I'm not saying necessarily that the mobsters themselves directly did the hit, because as we mentioned when we interviewed Sammy the Bull, Sammy pointed out that the way we would do this is if it was something like a high profile thing, we wouldn't directly do it. We would find another kind of person wound up to either be the patsy or to be the one that would do it and take the heat, etc. So this is a pretty interesting document because it does back up basically the kind of secret team analysis that you get in Fletcher Prouty, right? So Fletcher Prouty in his book Secret Team says, I was in this, we're part of a breakaway clique, basically the CIA, that runs around the world, and we do assassination, sabotage, coups, fake news, regime change, you name it. It's what we do. And you could take issue with some of his claims, maybe, but I mean, the book is pretty well known. It's pretty famous. And why would any of this be surprising, by the way? It's like, after all the things that we've learned in the last 5 years, like all this, none of this should be surprising. So this one I think was really interesting. This memorandum about this guy who was part of the Pentagon and was a sort of a ghost operative, probably some kind of he sounds like Fletcher Prouty, secret team kind of guy. And he says, yeah, this was organized crime and the CIA, a faction of the CIA doing this. Now here's a little more of this. It says, the friends whom Underhill visited say he was a sober person, but he was badly shook. They say he attributed the Kennedy murder to a CIA clique that was carrying on a lucrative racket in gun running, narcotics, and other contraband. He was manipulating, and they were manipulating political intrigue and figures to serve their own ends. Kennedy supposedly got wind that something was going on and was killed before he could blow the whistle. Although the friends had already known Underhill to be perfectly rational and objective, they at first didn't take him as seriously. We couldn't believe that the CIA could contain a corrupt element every bit as ruthless and more efficient than the Mafia. Really? So that one is, I think, pretty good. This one is a little less clear. RT found this or mentions this. It just says, it says secret bases, and it's a list of but we don't know exactly what that means. Is this like CIA stations? Is this torture facilities? Is this a black site? Is this a safe house? But probably not relevant anymore since it's going back to the Cold War. Here's another one that says the CIA was wanting to keep the Warren Commission out of the public domain, and they had every reason to do that. Now, why would the CIA have every reason to not want people to know what the Warren Commission was finding? That, to me, speaks to a cover-up. Here's one that is another Catholic NGO organization. And to the Catholics who've been mad and fussing and bitching at me, this is in a string of documents that I've been covering. This is not a sole isolated document, because when I posted this, somebody said, oh, they had one operative in a NGO, so what? No, this is one operative in an NGO amongst many operatives throughout the Roman Catholic Church. But this was an outfit called Catholic Association for International Peace. And the document notes in section 3 that the above items were received by Oliver Corbiston, who has joined CAIP for cover purposes. And so he's a CIA operative who joined this outfit as a cover. That's just one example among many. This one is several documents that another profile found, and this is Operation Mongoose. And the only reason I re-shared this one is because in the stream that we did, 2 nights ago on certain Middle Eastern countries and their intelligence, I did a 3-hour talk. You don't ever talk about the countries in the Middle East. Oh, really? I did a 3-hour talk on it. You don't ever talk about it. Oh, really? I covered Viktor Ostrovsky's Mossad book. Oh, you don't ever talk about it. Well, this relates to it because this is Operation Mongoose. And he says, this shows the CIA playbook on how they conduct regime change. Now, this is correct because this is basically the same sort of pattern or model. It's a technology, right? Color revolutions, it's all the same type of stuff. These files highlight how CIA used psyops, media, espionage, economics to target the Cuban politicians, use covert actions. The documents even mention black market activities. Duh. Exactly like Gladio. They used Time magazine as an implement of dissemination. Why would they use Time magazine? Well, that's because Henry Luce of Time magazine was Skull and Bones and worked closely with the OSS and the CIA. And that's a gigantic section of David Wimhoff's book, which we have already been talking about. The CIA has been incontrovertibly engaged in regime change for decades. Well, yeah, who doesn't know this? They use a similar playbook. That's, I think, an interesting point, that it's a similar playbook. What evidence is there that the CIA ever stopped? Well, of course they didn't. We've been talking about color revolutions for years. We already mentioned F.O.M. Engdahl and all these other texts. This is extremely pertinent to the war in Ukraine. You have Victoria Nuland, you have Operation Mongoose with many parallels. So you can go read this. I'm not going to read all these documents there because that one's kind of, people already knew about Operation Mongoose, but it's an interesting side point. Another document is mentioned here, which is that it looks like Arthur Schlesinger, who was one of Kennedy's close advisors, he warns Kennedy about the CIA being too powerful, too reckless, and having a government within a government. What does that sound like? Have we ever heard the idea of a state within a state? Like a shadow government or a deep state? But this is actually mentioned by Schlesinger, the advisor to Kennedy, in National Archive file 176-10030-10422. So there's that document. And another interesting one, which we all already kind of knew about, but maybe a bunch of you normies didn't know about this. It's another CIA file dealing with 1963 document, internal review of the agency's drug recruitment efforts, noting a significant lack of significant results. The document stresses that the program's shortcomings were due to inefficient handling of delayed responses in Cuba, where candidates were initially eager but lost motivation. It says drug dips. So I'm guessing that means drug recruiting. I mean, I don't follow Mario Nafal, so I don't know what he's talking about, but it sounds like recruiting people involved in organized crime. Again, not a shocker if you know about Operation Underworld. In view, I can't read that, it's too blurry, but it just mentions drug dips. I don't know what that is. Okay, next. This one is the most probably interesting of these. I don't think I've seen anybody say these were previously released, but this is, of course, one of the key connections that was written about and theorized about by this, the hardcore JFK conspiracy nerds. And this was the connections and the back channels that James Jesus Angleton had with certain foreign countries. And you'll notice that the memo mentions here, let's see what it says. As you're aware, Angleton, the CIA, frequently turns over to the Bureau highly confidential basis information which has been developed through operations headed by Angleton. In many instances, the information is given to the Bureau without clearly going through the regular CIA channels. In almost all instances, it is given to us with a clear understanding that if included in a report or other communication prepared for dissemination outside the Bureau, I'm guessing this is an FBI document that the CIA has, it says, it can be traced back either to Angleton or the CIA. In such instances where the information relates to Middle Eastern country, it has been the practice of Middle Eastern country. And then the next document says, in 54, a procedure was approved whereby we could attribute certain information received from James Jesus Angleton, CIA, under the symbol of Bureau Informant 100. This information, for the most part, emanated from a liaison agreement which the CIA maintained with Middle Eastern intelligence and from other sources under the control of Angleton. Much of the information was developed by him and was not disseminated within the CIA. He felt that the data should be passed to the Bureau. Dulles gave him the authorization to handle dissemination in this way. We continue to receive information on this of this nature of value on a regular basis. So there's a back channel. And then it goes on to say, as you know, the continued individual, captioned individual, is providing the Bureau with considerable information, much of it of a very sensitive nature. It has been noted that in transmitting communications to Angleton, some memoranda have been sent to the director of the CIA, Angleton, in care of E.F. Hall. Other memoranda dealing with Middle Eastern intelligence matters have been directed to Angleton. And then it goes on to say, Angleton states that the above request was being made with the approval of Dulles, director of CIA. He further indicates that he desired the above method designation in connecting with correspondence dealing with Middle Eastern intelligence with regard to the Bureau reports. So again, just another statement of back channel. And then this one says, Angleton handles special cases. He has considerable freedom and leeway. He is directing the operations of his unit. In general, he is responsible to the CIA. Numerous foreign sources and channels for developing info. The primary source is Israeli intelligence. Primary source. So Angleton is essentially back channel attached at the hip to Middle Eastern countries. Interesting. Which I think everyone already sort of knew, but here we have full-on documentation, which it looks like these are FBI files, which is interesting too. I have people digging and finding other more interesting things. This has only been 24 hours, maybe even less than 24 hours. According to Lord Voldemort, there's another 1/3 of the documents that have not yet been declassified. So we might actually see, more stuff dropping that's even more wild or interesting. But again, it looks like it confirms pretty much what most of the researchers assumed or thought was going on, who had, kind of hardcore integrative takes that integrated Mafia, CIA, and other foreign countries.